Welcome everyone to Whimsy Woven Stories. Here, we explore gripping tales of real-life twists. Join our storytelling community.
For the first time in 5 years, I was leaving a business show a day early. I work for a telecommunications company, and every year we participate in 3 business shows. The shows are held in different cities around the country, and each show lasts 5 days. We go in and set up our booth on Sunday and Monday, and the show begins Tuesday morning and ends at noon on Thursday. For the last 5 years I have worked every one of those shows, and I always stayed until the last box was packed and loaded on the truck Thursday afternoon. That is until this last show. The last show I worked was back in May at the San Diego Convention Center. It was on Tuesday night, during that show, that I twisted my ankle badly and was unable to work in our booth the next day. At lunch on Wednesday, my boss told me that there was no point to my staying at the show if I couldn't work, so he told me to see if I could get a flight home. I didn't have to be told twice. I was on a plane back to St. Louis at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Before I boarded the flight in San Diego, I called home and left a message for Tammy, my wife of 9 years, telling her I would be home by 8 o'clock that evening. Tammy had been upset with me about something before I left on the trip, but she didn't want to discuss it at the time. She said we could deal with it when I got back home. While I didn't like having a sprained ankle or having my boss tell me to go home before the conference was over, I was glad to be getting home early so that I could find out what was bothering my wife. When my taxi stopped in front of the house, I noticed a black Cadillac in our driveway. I didn't know anyone that drove a Cadillac, and it bothered me a little that Tammy would have company at the house when she knew I was coming home. I thought that she would be anxious to discuss whatever problem she thought we had. As I walked in the front door, I heard voices in the family room. I stepped out of the hallway into the kitchen and peeked into the family room and got the shock of my life. Tammy was sitting on the sofa with my best friend Chad Williams. This in itself was not the shock. The fact that Tammy's blouse was unbuttoned was what struck me so hard. Tammy and Chad hadn't seen me yet, so I walked through the kitchen and stood at the edge of the family room. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted. Tammy turned to look at me and then put her hand up to her mouth. "Oh my God. George, what are you doing home?" she asked. There was something about the way she said that, and that she didn't try to hide the fact that her blouse was unbuttoned, that seemed very odd. It was almost as if she had expected this to happen. "What is going on here?" I asked. "It's not what you think, honey," Tammy said. She was actually smiling when she said it. I began to wonder if I was dreaming until I felt the pain in my ankle again and knew that I was awake. In the short time I had been in the room, Chad hadn't moved. He just stared at me with an amused look on his face. I had all that I was going to take. Chad is a big guy, but I didn't care how big he was or how much my ankle hurt. I was going to throw the bastard out of my house. I took one step toward the sofa and suddenly found myself in the grip of another man. I never heard him coming. He grabbed my right arm and twisted it up behind my back and put his left arm around my neck in some kind of a chokehold. I was able to breathe, but I knew that he could cut off my airway anytime he wanted to. "I think you understand the situation now, George," Tammy said. "We have been waiting for you so we could start our little party. Chad finally told me what you do at those business shows. Did you really think I would never find out about your girlfriends? Or did you just think I wouldn't care? Well, for your information, I do care. You hurt me, and now I am going to hurt you. I am going to play with Chad and Tyrone, and you get to watch. How do you like that?" I tried to tell Tammy she was wrong, but before I could get a word out, the guy holding me put something over my mouth and nose. The smell of whatever he was holding over my nose was choking me, and I soon felt myself losing consciousness. I don't know how long I was out before I woke up to find myself tied spread eagle to the bed in the guest bedroom. My injured ankle felt like it was being pressed against a hot iron, while my other ankle and my wrists were beginning to feel numb. Taking a quick look, I saw that my wrists and ankles were secured to the bed with speaker wire. Tammy must have gotten the wire from my workshop. Whoever tied me down had made the bindings so tight that they were cutting off my circulation. For a moment I had forgotten what Tammy had said to me just before I lost consciousness, but that memory came back to me when I heard the voices on the television placed at the end of the bed. I looked at the television and saw Tammy sitting on our bed completely nude with Chad. "George, are you awake yet? I hope you are, because I wanted to show you this big beautiful tool that I am going to enjoy," Tammy said as she looked directly at the camera. "Chad gets to do me first because he is the one who told me about your cheating and because he helped me set this up," she said. "Tyrone, come over here so that George can see what a nice tool you have too." Tyrone must have been the guy that grabbed me from behind when the black man stepped into the picture. "I hope you enjoy the show, George." "I know I will. We are videotaping this so you can watch this as many times as you want." At that point I no longer cared what Tammy did. Our marriage was over. The only thing I cared about at that moment was getting loose from my bindings. I was worried about the lack of blood circulation to my hands and feet. I had no idea how long it might be before Tammy and her friends finished what they were doing, and I wasn't about to wait for them. I began pulling on with my left leg as hard as I could, but had to stop because of the pain. I waited 30 seconds and then pulled again. I did this several times and then finally gave one hard yank and the wire snapped. I looked at my left ankle and saw that it was bleeding, but the injuries didn't seem too serious. Next I went to work on my right leg. This was much harder because my right ankle was the one I had sprained. By the time I was able to break the wires on my right leg, I had ripped a lot of skin off my ankle and it was bleeding quite a lot. With my legs free I was able to release the strain on my arms, but I wasn't able to loosen the knots in the wire, only having my teeth to work with. I ended up having to try to break the wires that bound my wrists the same way I had the ones on my ankles. By the time I got my right wrist free, it was bleeding nearly as bad as my right ankle. With both legs and my right arm free, I was able to break loose from that last of my bindings fairly easily. My left wrist received only minor cuts, but it was bleeding a little. Once free, I noticed I was still bleeding from injuries to both ankles and both wrists. I looked around the room to see if there was anything I could use as bandages, but there was nothing. The bed sheet was a mess. I was surprised at how much blood there was on the bed. I tried to stand up, but my head began spinning and I had to sit down again. Now my head was pounding and my face hurt and I was feeling nauseous. I had my eyes closed and was trying to calm my stomach when I heard my name. For a moment I thought Tammy had walked into the room, but when I opened my eyes I realized it was her talking to me on the television. "George, are you watching this?" When I looked at the television I saw Tammy taking from Chad doggy style. I wondered for a brief moment if Tammy thought that I would somehow enjoy watching her getting drilled. If she had any idea how angry I was at the moment, I think she would have run from the house. I got off the bed and swung my right arm in an arc toward the television. This movement caused blood to splatter across the screen. I turned away from the television and saw myself in the mirror. There was a large bump on my forehead that was already beginning to turn black and blue. Upon closer inspection, it wasn't one bump but 4 small lumps. They were the kind of marks that would be left by someone's knuckles if you were punched in the head. I could not believe that my wife would arrange to have me drugged, beaten, and then tied to a bed so that she could humiliate me by having sex with my former best friend and some black guy I had never seen before. I thought about getting a baseball bat and going after the 3 of them, but realized that there was a big downside to doing that. I wasn't exactly feeling very strong at the moment. I was still feeling a little dizzy from whatever drug they had used on me, and if Chad and his friend overpowered me, there is no telling what they might do. On the other hand, if they weren't able to overpower me, I might kill someone and they weren't worth my going to jail. Looking again at the mess in the room, an idea started to form. I smeared blood on the bedposts and the pillows. Then I made 2 smeared parallel lines of blood on the carpet going from the side of the bed to the door. I went across the hall to the guest bathroom and found some gauze and adhesive tape under the sink. Before I left the bathroom, I was careful to make sure that I didn't leave any blood in the sink, on the cabinet door, or on the floor. Luckily, the master bedroom in our house was downstairs, so I didn't have to worry about Tammy or her lovers hearing me. I went back into the bedroom where I used my training to perform first aid on myself. I bandaged both ankles and my left wrist, leaving only the injuries to my right wrist exposed. Then I picked up the cordless phone next to the bed, making sure I got blood on it, and dialed 911. When the 911 operator answered, I said, "Please help me. I think they are going to kill me. Oh God." Then I dropped the phone on the floor without disconnecting. Taking the gauze and tape with me, I then slipped down the back stairway that leads into the garage and then out of the house. Walking past the car in the driveway, I smeared some blood in the driver's door handle and put my bloody handprint on the trunk lid. After that, I walked over to the empty lot, across the street from the house, and found a hiding place behind some bushes and sat down to wait for the show. While I waited, I bandaged my right wrist. The wait wasn't very long. Within 5 minutes, the first police car arrived. 2 officers got out of the car and approached the house as the second car arrived. The 2 officers from the second car went around to the back of the house while the 2 at the front door waited until they were in position. One of the officers at the front door rang the doorbell. He waited about 30 seconds and rang it again, and after another 30 seconds he pounded on the door with his hand. The front porch light came on and Tammy opened the door. I would have bet that she was ready to piss her panties when she saw the police at the door. Unfortunately, I was too far away to see the expression on her face. "We had a 911 call from this address a few minutes ago. Can you tell us what that call was about?" one of the officers asked Tammy. "I don't know anything about a 911 call," she said. "Who else is in the house with you?" "No one." Tammy was in trouble now. They would never accept that answer. "You say there is no one else in the house?" "That's right. I am home alone. My husband is out of town at a business show," Tammy said. At that moment, Tammy's world turned to shit. The 2 officers that had gone around to the back of the house reappeared with Chad and Tyrone in hand. "Look who we found sneaking out the back door." It was the officer holding on to Chad who had spoken. When Tammy saw Chad and Tyrone, she seemed to lose her legs and she slid down against the door casing until she was sitting on the floor. One of the officers helped Tammy to her feet and took her back into the house. Then the other officers took Chad and Tyrone into the house. I was disappointed that I couldn't see what was happening inside the house. I tried to imagine the scene when the police opened the door to the guest bedroom and saw the mess. The shocked look on Tammy's face when she saw that I wasn't in the room would be priceless. I looked at the car in the driveway and wished that I could sneak across the street and get into the trunk, but I couldn't risk being seen. There were 10 minutes of total silence followed by all kinds of noise and confusion. 2 more police cars arrived on the scene with sirens and lights. Shortly after that, Chad and Tyrone were brought out of the house in handcuffs, both arguing with the police, saying that they didn't do anything to the woman's husband. The 2 men were placed in the back seat of separate cars and left while the police officers took a close look at the car in the driveway. The blood on the driver's door handle was spotted rather quickly, followed by the discovery of the blood on the trunk lid. One of the officers went to the car Tyrone was in and got the car keys and then opened the trunk. I really did wish I could have been in the trunk when he opened it, but as it turned out, it didn't matter. The officer looking into the trunk called another officer over and then a third. "We have weapons and drugs here." The officer called out to a plainclothes officer who had just arrived on the scene. 3 MAC-10s and about a kilo of what appears to be cocaine. For the next 20 minutes I watched as the police took pictures of the contents of the trunk of Tyrone's car and then had the car towed away. The 2 cars that Chad and Tyrone were in left, and a short while later Tammy came out of the house in handcuffs and was placed in a patrol car and was driven away. There were still police in the house and I watched as they put crime scene tape across the front door. I decided then that it was time for me to leave. I walked through the empty lot to the street behind, and then keeping to the shadows I walked the 10 blocks to a shopping center with a McDonald's restaurant. I realized that I looked pretty messed up with bloody bandages on my wrists and ankles and a black and blue goose egg on my forehead, but I needed to get off the street for a while and I had just enough change in my pocket to buy a large cup of coffee. When I walked into the restaurant, I expected everyone to stare at me, but as it turns out I fit right in with the crowd in that particular McDonald's. There must have been 15 street people in there, eating a burger or drinking coffee. No one paid any attention to me as I sat in a corner and drank my coffee. As I thought about what I had instigated, I couldn't help but smile. The image of Tammy, Chad, and Tyrone being questioned by the police made me almost laugh out loud. The police would be asking them what they did with my body, and of course they couldn't answer the question, and anything they did say would be assumed to be lies. The one problem I still had was how to reappear and not be accused of intentionally misleading the police. By the time I finished my coffee, I had an idea that I thought would work. When I took my empty coffee cup up to the counter to ask for a refill, the manager came over and told me he would refill my cup if I would then leave the restaurant. I accepted his offer. With a fresh cup of coffee in hand, I started off on the 20-block walk to a park I was familiar with. Between ducking behind trees and shrubs anytime I saw a car coming and the difficulty I had walking on my injured ankle, it took me nearly an hour to walk to the park. Once there, I found a picnic table in a dark corner of the park, and I sat there until 3 o'clock in the morning. At that time, I removed my bandages and threw them in the trash, and then moved to the far side of the park and lay down in the grass next to a jogging trail. In spite of the pain in my wrists and ankles, especially my right ankle, I was able to sleep on and off until the sun began to come up. I lay as still as I could, hope that I might even fall asleep again as I waited for what I knew was going to happen. The park I was in was a favorite for joggers and people walking their dogs in the morning. I knew that I would soon be discovered by one of them. I was right, and within a half hour I was in the back of an ambulance headed for the hospital. I had left my wallet on the bedside table in the guest room at home, so I had no identification when I got to the hospital. For some reason, I wasn't coherent when the doctors in the emergency room tried to find out who I was and what happened to me. I also had a hard time staying awake. I wanted to make sure my charade didn't end too soon. It was almost noon before the police showed up. I faked sleep until nearly 1 o'clock, and then I was ready to talk. I had been rehearsing what I would say and how I would answer questions so that I would not stray too far from the truth. "Mr. Grant? Are you Mr. George Grant?" the plainclothes officer asked. "Yes. I'm George Grant. Mr. Grant, I am Detective Munson, and I would like to ask you a few questions if you are up to it." "Okay, but I am not sure how much help I'll be. I don't remember much of what happened. I don't even know how I got here. You were found in a park by a man walking his dog about 6 o'clock this morning." "Why don't you tell me what you do remember?" Munson said. "I came home from a trip to San Diego last night. I was a day earlier than I was supposed to get home. When I walked in the house, I found my wife talking to my best friend, Chad Williams. When I asked her what was going on, some guy grabbed me from behind and held me while my wife started yelling at me about something. I was having trouble breathing, so I wasn't able to concentrate on what Tammy was saying. I think they must have drugged me, because the next thing I remember was that I woke up in our guest bedroom and I was tied to the bed. I noticed that I was bleeding where they had tied my wrists and ankles, and I was beginning to lose sensation in my hands and feet. I managed to get loose, but I did more damage to my wrists and ankles. That's when I noticed the television. It was turned on and the picture was coming from the master bedroom. Tammy was having sex with Chad and another man, a big black guy I had never seen before. I thought I heard them talking about what they were going to do with me when they finished fucking my wife. It sounds like they were planning to kill me, but I can't be sure because my thinking was still a little cloudy. I thought that they were raping Tammy and they were going to kill both of us, and that's when I managed to break the wire they had used to tie me to the bed. Then I called 911. You didn't finish that call, Mr. Grant. Why did you drop the phone? Munson asked. I dropped the phone when I realized that Tammy was a willing participant. I thought I heard her say something like, "Go take care of that asshole." So I decided that I had better try and get out of the house, but I don't remember anything after that. I obviously got out, but I don't know how. Do you remember anyone hitting you? Munson asked. No, I don't think so, I said, but a lot of what happened is still a little cloudy. What is my wife saying about what happened? She claims that she found out you have been cheating on her on your business trips, so she wanted to teach you a lesson. She said that you weren't supposed to be injured and that they were going to release you as soon as she was done getting even with you. Did she say where she got the idea that I cheated? I asked. She said that Mr. Williams told her. What a stupid bitch. The only proof she has that I cheated is the word of one person, and he's the one she decides to fuck to get even with me. I said. I thought she was smarter than to fall for something like that. So you were saying that you never had an affair? You're damn right, I said. I have never cheated on my wife, and all she had to do was ask me about it. I could have easily proved that I hadn't cheated. It kind of makes me wonder if maybe this was just something she wanted to do and she used this supposed cheating thing as an excuse. Detective Munson asked me a few questions to clarify some points, but he didn't challenge anything I had said. I was released from the hospital the following day. When I got home, there was a message on our message recorder from Tammy. She was pleading with me to come down to the police station and tell them this was all a misunderstanding. She said she needed me to post her bail so she could get out. I erased the message and got a beer out of the refrigerator. The phone rang again, and it was Susan Crawford, Tammy's best friend. Susan was a divorcee. Her husband caught her cheating and tossed her ass out in the street. I had never liked Susan, and I didn't like the influence she had on Tammy. Somehow, I knew she had something to do with Tammy's behavior. Susan said that she needed to talk to me and it was important. Being the curious sort, I invited her over. Susan arrived an hour later. I talked to Tammy, Susan said. She's at her parents' house. She told me that you were cheating on her when you went on your business trips. You know that's bullshit. I have never cheated on her. Did she tell you what she did? She just said that there was some kind of misunderstanding and that you called the police and they arrested her, Susan said. I can't believe that Tammy did anything that bad. You really had her arrested? Why? I spent the next 20 minutes telling Tammy the same thing I had told Detective Munson. After all, most of it was the truth. Susan pretended to be shocked, but she didn't turn against Tammy. That is not like Tammy. I just can't believe she would do something so insane unless she had some sort of a breakdown, Susan said. Maybe so. Are you going to talk to her? Give her a chance to explain her side of things. Susan asked. Maybe, if I have to. But I have to ask why she didn't give me the same consideration. If she thought I was doing something out of line, why didn't she discuss it with me before doing something so drastic? Did she talk to you about this? No. If she had, I would have told her to talk to you about it, Susan said. I didn't believe that for a minute. I was pretty sure that Susan didn't think much of me, so I didn't think she would have objected to Tammy's idea for revenge. I really don't know what got into her, George. All I can say is that you shouldn't do anything until you have all the facts, Susan said. Don't worry. I won't, I said. Susan said, good, and then kissed me on the mouth and asked me if there was anything she could do to help me. I had no doubt what she meant, but I played dumb. No, Susan. You have already been a big help. I just need to be alone for a while. As soon as Susan left, I called a lawyer and made an appointment for that afternoon. At 2 o'clock I was in the offices of Brian L. Townsend III. I quickly outlined what Tammy had done to me and that I wanted him to start divorce proceedings against her as soon as possible. I told him that I would like her served with the papers the very next day. Mr. Grant, are you sure you want to proceed so quickly with this? Before you have all the facts? Mr. Townsend asked. I am 68 years old and have handled more divorces than you can imagine. A lot of those marriages could have been saved if the couple had just spent a little more time to be sure it was what they wanted to do. Don't you think you should take a little more time to think about this before you proceed? Perhaps you are right. Maybe I should give this a little more thought, I said. Good. Good. I am glad that you are willing to give this a little more time. Yeah, I'll give it some more time, I said. Instead of serving Tammy with the divorce papers tomorrow like I had planned, why don't we wait until the day after tomorrow? Mr. Townsend looked a little perplexed. The day after tomorrow? I thought you agreed to wait a while. Are you sure you want to move that fast on this? Mr. Townsend, with all due respect, if you are not willing to act on my behalf in this matter, there are several other lawyers in the phone book who will, I said. Okay, Mr. Grant, if that's what you want, I will have the papers served on your wife day after tomorrow. I told Mr. Townsend III that Tammy was at her parents' house and gave him the address, and I gave him her work address as well. When I left his office, I was feeling numb, except of course for my right ankle that was still hurting like a son of a bitch. As soon as I left Mr. Townsend III's office, I went to the bank and closed all of our joint accounts and canceled our joint credit cards. Then I opened new accounts in my name only. I knew that eventually I would probably have to give her half of the money, but I was going to make her work for it. Over the next couple of weeks, Tammy tried to call me several times at work and at home. I didn't answer any of her calls. Then I got a call from my lawyer and he told me that Tammy was going to contest the divorce unless I agreed to sit down with her so that she could tell me her side of the story. I'll need some time to think about that, I said. That's fine. Just call me when you decide what you want to do, Mr. Townsend III said. I waited a little more than a month before I called Mr. Townsend III back. Does Tammy still want to meet with me before she will agree to the divorce? I asked. I expected to hear back from you much sooner than this, he said. I'll contact her attorney and find out if she is still insisting on a meeting. Mr. Townsend III called me back later that day and told me that Tammy did indeed still want a meeting with me. Here's what I want you to tell my wife, I said. Tell her that I will not sit down for a face-to-face with her, and if she wants to contest the divorce, that's fine with me. We will just put the whole thing on hold until she is ready to agree to the divorce. We will still be married in the meantime, but I will not see her or talk to her. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, Mr. Grant. I will pass along your response. The next day I went to visit Chad's wife, Beverly. She invited me in and offered me a drink. We sat on the sofa next to each other and she started to apologize for what Chad had done, but I stopped her. Beverly, you are no more responsible for what Chad did than I am for what Tammy did. They are responsible for their own actions. You're right, of course. But I still feel bad about what happened to you. The reason I came over today was to see if perhaps you would like to comfort each other, I said. Why, George? You little devil. You know, Beverly, I have always thought that you were very attractive, and had I met you when I was single, I probably would have asked you out. I just kind of thought that now maybe. Before I could finish the statement, Beverly leaned into me and kissed me. I'd love to, she said. Beverly led me to the bedroom where I relieved her of her clothes. Our lovemaking was slow and deliberate. Anytime you want to get together to comfort each other again, just let me know, Beverly whispered into my ear. I love what you are doing to me, and I think I love you. The following week I got a call from the district attorney's office. Mr. Grant, this is Andrew Hartley. I am the assistant DA handling the cases against your wife, Chad Williams, and Tyrone Mathers. Your wife's attorney has told us that he believed that you were not going to press charges against your wife. Is that correct? No, that is not correct. I haven't discussed that with anyone. I really don't know what I should do. I know that my wife was involved in what happened to me, but I don't know if she had planned to have me drugged and beaten or to have me tied up. I think she did, but I can't prove that. I also don't know who tied me to the bed so tightly that I was losing circulation to my hands and feet. I am not asking that any charges be dropped. I'll leave it up to you to decide what to do with these people. In the end, everyone got what they deserved. Tyrone was convicted of assault and kidnapping, along with felony drug possession and another felony for the guns found in the trunk of his car. Chad pleaded guilty to assault and Tammy pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit unlawful restraint. I think they made that one up just for her. Chad got 1 year at a minimum security prison and Tyrone got hard time at a maximum security prison. Tammy got off the easiest. She was put on probation. In spite of the light sentence Tammy got, it was still considered to be a felony conviction. She no longer had any say in the matter of our divorce. I got rid of her but kept the house and all of our savings. A month after our divorce, Susan came to see me and asked me if I would talk to Tammy. She told me that Tammy just wanted to explain what she had done and apologize to me. I acted reluctant to meet with her, but in actual fact, I was a little curious to hear what Tammy would have to say. I let Susan talk me into meeting Tammy at a cocktail lounge about a mile from my house. "Thanks for agreeing to see me," Tammy said as she slid into the booth across from me. "George, I am so sorry for what I did to you," she started, "but you have to understand what I was going through. I had just found out that you were having affairs every time you went out of town." "No, I wasn't." "What?" I said no, I wasn't. I was not having affairs. "I never cheated on you," I said. "Of course. I know that now, but I didn't know it then," Tammy said. "Chad told me that you were cheating on me and I believed him. He was your best friend, so I didn't think he would lie to me. I was so hurt and angry, I guess I lost my mind for a while. Let me get this straight. When I was getting ready to go away on that last trip, you already thought that I was having affairs every time I went away." "Yes, I was." "So, when I asked you what was bothering you before I left, why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I should have, but I needed more time to deal with it before I could talk to you about it." When I was finally able to stop laughing at her, I said, "You had only Chad's word for it that I was cheating on you, but you weren't ready to ask me if it was true, although you were ready to plan your revenge. And it didn't make you at all suspicious that Chad wanted to be part of your revenge." "I'm sorry. I can't explain what came over me." "Bullshit. Whose idea was it to bring Tyrone in on this deal?" "Chad suggested that we needed someone to make sure that you wouldn't hurt us or get away before we could tie you to the bed. Tyrone was a friend of Chad's. Chad has nice friends. I didn't know that he hung around with drug dealers," I said. "How did you let Chad talk you into letting Tyrone fuck you?" Tammy's face turned red and she looked away from me. "I had sex with Chad the night before you came home. He said adding Tyrone would add insult to injury." Holy shit. This story just keeps getting better. Can I ask you what you expected would happen when this was over? Did you expect me to forgive you for what you did to me? Well, I thought it would make us even then so we could move on and put this all behind us. This caused me to have another laughing fit. Let's assume for a moment that I was actually cheating on you, okay? You didn't know about it, so it wasn't hurting you until Chad told you I was cheating, I said. I can understand how painful that would be to you, but you still didn't actually catch me cheating. You never saw me even talking with another woman, let alone fucking one. So instead of confronting me and telling me that you found out I was having an affair, you decided to get even. Your plan for getting even was to drug me, then tie me to the bed so that you could make me watch you fucking two guys, one of which used to be my best friend. This whole scene was designed to humiliate me, and you somehow thought that this would make us even? Most wives would just have an affair of their own if they wanted to get even. What you did was way beyond just getting even. You went way too far, and even if I had cheated on you, I would not be able to forgive you for what you did to me." Tammy dropped her head and began to sob. "Please give me another chance. I love you. I have always loved you. You are the only man I have ever loved. I didn't mean to hurt you. What I did with Chad and Tyrone was just sex, it had nothing to do with love. Please, isn't there anything I can do to make you love me again? I'll do anything you ask if you'll just give me another chance." Tammy was looking at me with her eyes open wide and tears streaming down her cheeks. I never could stand to watch her cry. "Did you really mean it, Tammy?" "Did I mean what?" she asked. "Did you mean it when you said that you would do anything I asked?" Tammy tried to wipe the tears from her face. "Yes, I meant every word of it. I'll do anything you want." I slid out of the booth and stood up. I put my hand on Tammy's shoulder and bent down so that my mouth was close to her ear and said, "Drop dead." Tammy's head dropped down on top of the table and she began crying. I could still hear her crying as I walked out the door. 7 months later, Beverly and I got married.
Thanks for listening. Share your opinion in comment section and also do like and subscribe to the channel.